Welcome back to Blender Frenzy. I am Justin, and we are going to continue our little borderline animation with creating the little animation that you just saw. Now, I do apologize. My webcam, I'm still tweaking it. It's my OBS Studio is having a little bit of a hard time catching up with the quality of the webcam. Also, I have outdated equipment. But anyway, you don't have to have watched the previous video to watch this one. If you're just looking into adding keyframes, getting into animation, want to see what that's all about, this one is actually really going step by step, adding keyframes, just very simple, basic animation. You can do this with any animation that you have. But if you do want to follow along with the actual border line that you see, I highly recommend watching the first video where I show you how to actually model that like you see it. So anyway, without further ado, let's go ahead and get started. It's still a little bit choppy at times, and I hate it. And I don't know why it's happening, but we'll figure it out eventually. But hopefully this is smooth enough for you. So this is what we had finished or created last time in our border line. If we actually select our border line up here and come over to our um, object data properties tab here, and then in under geometry and then bevel, we have our bevel start and our end. So that is the start and the end line. If we click and drag in these values, we can see that border line going around that square. You can do the end and you can also do the start. You can kind of see how that works. So we are going to animate these now. And the best way to do that is to go over to our animation tab here, just like this. And at first, you can see we've got two viewport views open here. One of them is going to be for our rendered view, which is going to be this one. And this is going to be just like our layout view that we had just been on. So I'm going to hover my mouse over here, press 0 to go into the camera mode. And this is also a good opportunity for me to tell you, if you're not used to Blender, your mouse is very context sensitive. So any shortcut keys that you use, it's going to apply that shortcut to whatever viewport or whatever area your mouse is hovering over. So if I hover over here and I press home, or if I hover over here and I press home, it's going to act in whichever little window area you have your mouse cursor over. So just be mindful of that. Okay, so I'm going to click out of this, and you can see we have like this little Z fighting going on again, where you just it's in shaded mode. So I want to make sure this is going to be in material preview mode. So come up here and check this button here, viewport shading material preview mode. And over on this one, we're going to do rendered mode. So I'm going to go ahead and check rendered mode on that one. And the very first thing you can see, the difference is we have white text here, but we don't have white text here. And the reason is actually we don't technically have white text here. We have a text without any texture or material at all. So let's change that. And before we change that, actually, though, let's rename our text. So I want to, right now, this the is named text.002. I'm just going to come up here to our outliner, double click in there, and type text underscore THE. You don't have to name it this, but I'm just matching the name here. You can call this whatever you want, but this is going to be easier if each of these are called their respective things. It's going to be easier for our animation. So border, then line, select my line, and double click. And the reason I know that this is selected is if you can see if I select border here, this is now orange. So I'm selecting line. Now we haven't renamed this yet, so it's text.001, double click, and then type text underscore line, enter. Okay, so now we have each of our texts renamed to their specific name. Now let's open up under the hierarchy here. You can see that the curve itself is still just named text. So I'm just gonna double click in here, Control C to copy that, and then double click in here, and Control V to paste that there, enter. And when you do that, that means this goes into edit mode, and you can see this little outline over that curve. And you can see up here, it says edit mode. Just make sure you're aware of that. If I click that, that takes me in and out of edit mode the same way if I press tab. So just make sure you're aware of that. If you rename these, you might want to make sure you're back into object mode after you rename them. So, and we're in edit mode here, so I'm just going to click that little icon there, and now we're back out into object mode, which is where we want to be. Okay, perfect. Now let's change the color. So we're going to give them a material. We're going to start with the. So I'm going to select the. And then over here on the properties here, make sure you're in the properties panel. So that's this one here. Make sure this panel is the properties. We're going to come down to our material tab, which is this little icon here. And then we're going to click new to add in a new material. And I'm going to click in here and type MAT underscore text. Enter. You can call it whatever you want. It's just easier to have a naming convention here. And I want all of my text to have this material. Over under surface and surface, we're going to change principled BSDF to emission. Okay, and then now you can see since we've done that, our the over here is now white. So let's change the other two. We're going to click on the border, and you can see it's already on the material tab. Instead of pressing new, we already made the material, so we're going to click the drop down right next to it and then choose MAT text, which we have there. And now we have our border in our white text. Last one, our line. Let's click our line, do the same thing. Oop, not new. We want to choose the drop down and then matte text. And now we have a material, the same material on all of our text, which is that white material. Now, because there's one texture for all of the text, if I change that color, it changes it for all of them. You can see that here. So I'm going to right click to cancel that because I want to keep it at white. And we did this in the last one, just making sure that if you go to your render properties down in color management, make sure, especially for two-dimensional emission type animations, you want your display device to be sRGB, your view transform to be standard, which is filmic by default. And as I'm changing that, so you can kind of see it changes it slightly. Now it's not quite these pure colors. And that's meant more for rendering out images that are supposed to be photorealistic. So it's emulating light bouncing off of things and stuff. So make sure you change that from filmic to standard. Your look is none, exposure is 0, gamma is at 1. And a sequencer, of course, you can have that as sRGB as well. Going back to our material tab, make sure your strength here under the color is 1. If I change that strength up, it actually changes the color. Now, it might not do it with the white, but if you did have another color that was on there, it would wash it out basically if you have too much strength. So just keep that at 1. All right, so that does it for the color. Let's get into animation, which is what this video is supposed to be about. Down here, you have your dope sheet, which is acts like a timeline, but it has a little bit more information. And then underneath of that, you actually do have the timeline controls, and that's just the timeline which is squished down. So I just make sure you have that timeline open. If you don't, if it's just your dope sheet and you don't have anything like this down here, you can come to one of these corners down here where your cursor turns into a plus, and then you can click and drag up, and that duplicates the area here. So now I have 2 dope sheets, and then you would just come here and change that to your timeline, and then just make sure you drag that all the way down. So you have your timeline controls and you have your dope sheet controls because you'll need both of them. All right, so, but I already have the timeline obviously, so I'm just going to click my dope sheet on the top here in the corner where you see that plus, click and drag down into that duplicate one and then it merges those two into one another. You only have to do that if you don't actually have this there, but I think by default this animation tab already has that open there like that for you. Okay, another thing, let's set up our dope sheet. I'm going to uncheck this only selected here, and then go to this filter button and come up and uncheck summary. Now that's personal preference. I don't like to have the summary on. It just makes things a little too cluttered. Okay, make sure you have this area here open. If you don't, and it's all the way in like this, and you see this little arrow, just click that arrow and that pops out. And now let's add our first keyframe. Now you can see this is our playhead. If I click and drag that number on that playhead, you can see the playhead moves. We just want to make sure we are on frame 1. And then let's animate our border line first. So let me select our border line here from, I guess I can select it here. And then I'm going to click out of that. So it's deselected, but it's still active. You can see it's in this panel here. Now we don't want the material. I want to go back to the object data properties here. We're going to close shape and we're going to open, let's close shape keys as well, and then open geometry. And under bevel here, we have our bevel start and our end, which is what we want to use to animate. So we're going to animate our end border line going from the start to the end. So we're going to make this 0 here for frame 1. Make sure you're on frame 1. And then while this is 0, hover your mouse cursor over this value and press I on the keyboard, and it creates a keyframe. And you can see our value turns yellow and we have a keyframe down here. Now, if you notice, there are 2 keyframes, and even if I open up this hierarchy again for 3, now you can see there's 3 keyframes. Well, that's not really 3 keyframes, that's actually just 1 keyframe. It's just 1 keyframe that's represented down the hierarchy. So if I select one of them, they're all selected. It doesn't matter which one I select, they're all selected, and you can see they turn yellow. So I'm just going to go ahead and collapse that for now since it's just 1 and it's a little bit too cluttered there. So, and then I'm going to click and drag my playhead to frame 31 because I want this animation to last exactly 30 frames, and we started on frame 1. So 31 would be the 30th frame. And now you can see over here in our end, value has turned green. Now this green means that we have a keyframe on this value somewhere on the timeline, but not on the current frame. So the current frame is 31, there's no keyframe, our keyframe is still on frame 1. So let's change that. We're gonna click and drag in here and bring that all the way to 1. And now you see yet another color, and that is orange. The orange represents that there has been a change to the original value on frame 31. So the original value on frame 31 was 0, but now this has changed, but not yet added a keyframe. So if we don't add a keyframe at this point, and I move the playhead, then it snaps back to 0, which was the original value of that frame. So just make sure that you understand that if you just by moving this value and changing it doesn't mean you've actually set a keyframe unless you have automatic keyframe on. But I'm not going over automatic keyframes right now, just going over the regular. It won't automatically set that keyframe. So you'll have to hover your mouse again over that value and press I on the keyboard, and when it turns yellow, that means we have set a keyframe, and now you can see that keyframe. And now if I click and drag my playhead from frame 1 to frame 31, you can see that animation playing out. Now if I start at frame 1 and I press the space bar, then it plays on its own. And that's what it looks like. Let's go back here. Ta-da! Just like that. Okay, so right now our frame range is from 1 to 250, and you can see that down here, 1 to 250. I want to change that. We don't need 250 frames. I'm just going to click in here and type in 60. Enter. And now you can see the lighter area here is where our frame range is, and it ends at 60, and then the darker is outside of our frame range. So if I press play, you can press play and pause down here as well. But now we'll cycle through our frame range. So spacebar to play, and now you can see the animation is cycling through. I don't want to click that and select it. I just want to, there we go. And I apologize for it being choppy again. My computer, I definitely have outdated equipment, which I will change hopefully in the near future. But for now, it's a little choppy. But anyway, let's press play and pause. By the way, again, remember the context sensitivity of the mouse. If I press play up here, oh, actually it does play up here, but you just got to be careful with that. If I select all by pressing Control A, um, oops, sorry, not Control A, of course. In everywhere else it's Control A, but just A will select all of them here. If I hover my mouse over here and press A, it'll select all of those keyframes. So again, just keep that in mind. Now with my mouse hovering over here, I'm going to press Home and then scroll out just a little bit with my mouse wheel, middle mouse to click and drag. I'm just want to make sure the whole frame range here is in our view. Okay, so let's animate our text now. I'm going to select the and then press and hold shift and then select border and then line. So all of them are selected. And then I'm going to drag this over. Now I could come over here to 60 and then hit a keyframe for our end. But right now I just want to bring it to 1 just to show you how to kind of select and manipulate the keyframes here. So I know, before I move anything, I know that this placement of the text is exactly where I want the text to end. So this is the final resting place of our text. So I'm going to make keyframes for all of these first right here before I move them. So in order to do that, hover your mouse over the viewport with all of them selected, press I on the keyboard and then select location because that's what we're animating. We're animating the location. And now you can see they're all those keyframes, and you can see the hierarchies have opened here, and you can even open them more to see more information. We don't need all of that right now, so I'm just going to collapse those hierarchies there. So now we have our border line, and then all of our 3 texts. But like I said, these 3 keyframes for our text, this is our resting point. This is the end. So I'm going to, with all 3 of these selected, and if you don't know if they're selected, just click and drag around. They should be yellow, and the other 2 should be white because we don't want to move those just yet. So press G on the keyboard, again with your mouse over the timeline or the dope sheet, and we're going to drag those all the way to the end here because we don't want to mess with those just yet. I'm just going to click those. That's not going to be the final resting place of those, but for now we're just going to kind of drag them out of the way, knowing that those are the end keyframes. Okay, so now let's make the starting keyframes. So let's select our the, which is already selected in my case, press and hold shift, select the other 2, and then press G on the keyboard to grab, and now I can move it. Now it is snapping at too big of increments for me. I don't like that. So I'm going to right click to cancel that. And then I'm going to come up here to our overlays and then drop down and I'm going to change the scale. Now, if you have been following me before, in the previous video, we already changed our scale, but this was on our layout view. So you can see our scale is at 0.5 on our layout view, and over on our animation tab, our viewport is at 1. And this is important to point out that on different tabs, or if you open up different instances without copying it from that instance, the settings are going to be the default settings. So this is still default settings for the viewport on the animation tab, which is why the scale is still at 1. So I've got to change this to 0.5 to match my other one. I don't have to, but in order to move it like I want to in this instance, I want to do that. So let's press G and grab again, and now that's snapping into a little bit smaller of increments, but I even noticed that I want to go even less for those increments. So right click to cancel again, come up here, and I'm going to do 0.05, enter, and then grab, and now you can see that snapping at a lot smaller of increments, which is what I want. Now, after I've pressed G to grab, I can move my mouse anywhere I want, but I want to constrain it up and down. So I'm going to press Y to constrain it on the Y axis. And now it just, I can move it just up and down. I'm going to move that to where the text the is right below that border line here. So just like this. Okay, so that looks good there with all of them selected still. I'm going to hover my mouse over here, press I, and then select location again. And now we have 3 more keyframes. So now if we press play, we can see that the text goes up very slowly because basically it's taking 60 frames to go from our starting keyframes to our ending keyframes, just like that. But of course, we don't want this to be this sort of timing. We want to change the timing on all of these. So let's go back to frame 1. And then I'm going to click the end frame for our the, which is not that one. It's the last one. So this last one here, this is our end frame for the. Press G to grab that, and we're going to grab that and move it over to, let's try, I'm just shooting here at something, just testing out 20 frames. So if I press play, you can see that that goes up in a little bit more quickly using only 20 frames. But it's still a little bit too slow, and these are a little bit distracting too, because they're moving and I don't want them to move yet. So in order to change that, I'm going to disable them for just a little bit. Go into border, the middle checkbox, I'm just going to uncheck that for both of those. And now you can see, well, they're not moving, but they're not at their starting place. So I actually forgot what I need to do is go back to frame 1, where they're supposed to be down here, and then enable them again so that it recognizes that they're down there, and then uncheck them to disable them again, because I want to disable them while they're down here. And I'm going to close those. And now if I press play, you can see that text is going up. All right, cool. Let's make the text go a little bit faster. So with this one selected, G to grab, I'm going to move that to frame 10, just like that. And now, let's see what we have. Yep, there we go. I like that speed. So I want that the to come up pretty quickly. And now what we need to do is change the timing of the border line. So I'm going to select the first border line keyframe and then shift select the other one. Now you can also just click out of that. If you click out anywhere, it deselects everything, and then you click and drag. I can just click and drag a box around both of those. So now with those selected, I'm going to press G and grab, and I want this line to start right when the text stops. So I'm going to drag it to frame 10 and then press play and see what we have. So let's see what that looks like. Yeah, almost. So I don't like the fact that they start exactly, like once this one stops, this one starts. It seems a little bit too rigid still. So I'm gonna, with these two still selected, press G, and I'm gonna just move them back 2 keyframes so that it starts just before the gets into its final resting place. And let's go back to frame 1 and then press play. Yeah, I like that much better. So it comes up, and you can see that it really starts off that animation right before it gets there, but the illusion is a little bit more smooth. Okay, so now that we have that, let's finish the rest of the text. So now I know that I want the text to come up before this line comes around here, because I don't want it to go through the line. I just want it to be up and into position before this line comes around. So let's see where that is. So about right here, let's see, what's 22, 23? Yeah, well, let's try 23. So right here, everything should be into place. These two should be into place. So let me just click to deselect everything. so we can see things better. And then click and drag a box around these two. Press G to grab and move those to this frame here. And obviously you haven't seen anything happen because I need to re-enable these here. Okay, re-enabled. So now they're up in their position, and let's see what that looks like. There we go. That is pretty much, we're almost done here. So we've got the text going up into the square and the borderline, and man, that is going really slow. I do apologize. Yeah, we'll fix this. We'll fix this eventually with smoother playback. But it should be smooth for you. And now I want to add a little bit of variation. So I don't want the border and the line coming up exactly at the same time. So I just want to space them out a little bit further from each other. I definitely want the border to get into position first. So that means that this keyframe for the border, wait, where's the border? Is that it? Yeah. So this keyframe here, I'm going to press G to grab, just move that 2 frames. So on frame 21, and then I'm going to take the line and then I'm going to grab and just move 1 frame forward. So now the border will end here and then the line will end here. So let's take a look at what we have here. Yeah, that looks pretty cool. So it looks a lot more organic and a lot smoother, and it has sort of an elegance to it. And you can see the rendered over here, what that's going to look like. And if I change this to rendered as well, oh, I was like, well, it didn't change much because I still have my overlays on. There we go. And now we can see that a little bit better. Whoosh. All right, so there you go. That is the animation for our borderline. In the next video, I'll show you how to render this out into an image sequence and then overlay it onto a video or any sort of picture or color. And we'll go into the video sequence editor and make a couple of changes and adjustments to mess around with maybe when the text comes in, maybe working with a little bit of masking and maybe add a little vignette around it too to spice things up a little bit. So stay tuned, you'll see me in the next one. If you want an easier way to create these borders, you can use the Easy Borders rig that I created specifically for creating quick 2D borderline animation for things like titles and name tags for your videos. The rig has drag and drop handle controls, sliders, and color swatches to quickly adjust the size, position, and color of the border and fill. You can also easily make text appear and disappear with the vanish controls. Everything is on one screen, so you don't have to keep switching back and forth between panels and settings, and there are no add-ons required. The rig is just contained in a regular blend file, which means that it's ready to go straight out of the box. So if you're interested, head on over to my new course platform at courses.blenderfrenzy.com, where you can watch the welcome video and check out the Easy Borders course and expansion pack. Just click on one of the course options to see what's all included, plus a full description of the course. The course contains 6 modules, including a full introduction and Blender setup for those who are not yet familiar with Blender, 2 quick start modules to get you animating your first easy border in just minutes, a beginner's animation module, and much, much more. Right now, Easy Borders is still in early access, which means it's 50% off the normal price. This is only for a limited time, so if this is something that interests you and you'd like to show your support, come on and get it while the offer still stands. Just go to courses.blenderfrenzy.com and click on the course and then click Add to Cart. It is an online course, so create a new account and then you will have the option to purchase any of the courses that are offered. So I'm excited and I can't wait to see you there.